Hi, my name is Gwen Baggett Harris. I am a student at Grand Canyon University in the Masters of Education program in Special Education. This recording is for Survey of Special Education, Mild to Moderate Disabilities, and I am going to talk to you about IDA and the IEP process. The Individuals with Disability Act, an acronym, um, also known as IDA or IDEA, is known as the Federal Act of 1975, which the federal law ensured students with disabilities to receive a free, appropriate public education when eligible. There are specific requirements that must be met to provide services for students with disabilities in education, and that needs to be outlined in what's called an individualized educational program, also known as the IEP plan. Um, the Free Appropriate Public Education Act, which is also known as VAPE, allows special education students to receive special education and related services that are available for children eligible ages 3 through 21 years of age. Within this time frame, children who have been identified and evaluated with a disability may be eligible to receive services at no cost to the parents or the guardian. This first begins with a referral process. And how this works is the process is of identifying children for an IEP referral. This is also called child find. And how this works is the referral is implemented through several interventions based on the type of disability the child is displaying. There are several steps to this process. One would be the pre-referral, and that would be at the time where the teacher may notice some difficulties in the classroom with the student. And at the first onset of that teacher thinking or knowing that the child is having some difficulties with standard work, that is when that teacher would notify the student support facilitator, also known as the SSF. Some things that teachers may notice in the classroom would be inattention, fidgeting, easily distracted, noise is probably bothering the student. Those are some things that also may throw up some red flags or an indication to the teacher that the student may need an evaluation. The teacher would also observe the child as well, how they act in the classroom when it comes to making changes in the classroom, or how the child adapts to changes and accommodation. So in other words, the student may not do well seated next to other students, may be easily frustrated when changes in the classroom schedule happen, or may be irritated by lights and things of that nature. Progress monitoring with instructional interventions to identify strengths and area of improvement also is something that the teacher would identify through collecting data, work samples, reading, math. Those are also things that can be indicators that a student may or may not need an IEP or possibly a 504 plan or MTSS intervention. There's also another step in this process called the referral process. Once the student is identified through Child Find, the teacher gets with the SSF or the student support team. If the referral intervention is unsuccessful, in other words, they may, before you even get to this step, there may be some interventions put in place, maybe some modifications to the work. If the student still is not making progress, then you go a little further in the process, and at this point, it may be a referral. So if the pre-referral interventions are unsuccessful, a referral for special education services are started. Um, the referral information can be from several sources. It could be from the teacher, it can be from a family member, it can be from um, a medical staff, maybe a nurse, pediatrician, a caregiver, somebody at the daycare, somewhere along those lines that where someone has observed the child struggling academically or maybe even socially as well. Okay, and so you also have the identification step. So once the referral is made, the student is evaluated to determine if they have an exceptionality that would be eligible to receive special education academically or other related services, possibly OHI, other health impaired, may be the case, may not necessarily need an IEP. The child's activities at school and at home is generally how these things um, are factored in. So there's something called an interdisciplinary team. This team works together, um, and the interdisciplinary team is the child's teacher, the special education teacher, the general education teachers also are involved. You probably have an administrator, counselor, psychologist, the parent, obviously, and if the student is old enough and is capable of being able to advocate for themselves, they are also present um, in this framework with the interdisciplinary team. So everybody comes together and discusses data. They talk about the student's strengths and needs of improvement for writing an IEP. And this also comes through work samples. Before you get to that step, the parent has to sign permission for the student to be evaluated. Um, the teacher would then send paperwork home for the parents to look over. If the parents are approving of it, then they sign the paperwork, they send it back, and then at that point, the teacher um, meets again with the student support facilitator and the student support team, and they go ahead and call a meeting. The parent will then send an invitation to the parent or guardian to attend the meeting. And parents can attend the meeting or they may choose not to attend the meeting. On the form, there's a place to check. You know, there's a box to check. You will attend, you will not attend. Either way, the teacher does need the parent or guardian to respond um, as to their intent for the meeting. So um, once the meeting happens, depending on what happens in the meeting, what's found with the psychological evaluation, there's something called eligibility, excuse me. So once the child has been assessed and it's determined whether eligibility is met to have an IEP or maybe a 504 plan or possibly an MTSS, what happens from that point is the learning environment is going to be based on whatever that child's disability is after the child has been assessed. So whatever the learning environment is, for example, if the learning environment is, if the exceptionality is found to be autism, that student would go into an autism classroom. If the exceptionality is found to be cerebral palsy, maybe ataxia, that student will probably go into a MOI class. If the exceptionality is found to be maybe reading challenges or self-help skills, that student is probably going to go into a MID class, or the student may also go into an an inclusive environment, what's called interrelated, where they're probably functioning high enough to where they don't have to be in a self-contained classroom and can also learn in the general education classroom as well. Okay, so developing the IEP plan. The IEP team, which is made of, again, of the parents, guardians, teachers, administrators, and other specialists, whether it be from the school district or an outside source. Again, the student themselves, if they are old enough and capable enough to be able to attend, because we want the student to advocate for themselves as well and have input. So once the IEP team identifies the child's learning style, to ensure their success, long-term, short-term goals are set for the IEP plan. The parents may choose to have a child advocate present because, a lot of times parents don't know a lot of the language that is in the information. It's a lot of information that they get, and they may choose to have a child advocate there to explain information and to ensure that the child and the child's family receives the required resources the child needs. The child is going to need quite a few interventions, so the child advocate is really key for that parent to have present. The next step is going to be that implementation. So the student begins receiving IEP instruction in the classroom, and also other related services, maybe speech pathology, could be occupational therapy, could be adaptive PE. Those would be related services that the child could also be eligible for with an IEP. They receive accommodations and modifications to secure their success. Um, Things like shortened assignments. The work can be broken up into segments, oversized writing material, oversized scissors, iPad, assistive technology can also be used for this. They also would um, the seating arrangement is also adapted for the student. That's also called an accommodation. It may be a student where it needs to sit a little closer to the teacher, where the teacher may have to, give some verbal cues or some visual cues to get the student's attention. The evaluation and review process is also part of this IEP process. So consistent involvement and follow up with the parents. The parents are very key. They are the first and foremost advocates for the child. They know the child's needs better than anyone else because it's the child. They know what's needed more than anybody else for the child, and they are the best advocates for everything that the child is going to need, and make sure that they are receiving services appropriate for their exceptionality, for their learning environment. So the parent or guardians, they are required to keep the IEP team informed of any type of changes with the child, that is behavior, whether or not they're moving to another location, how the child is doing at home versus what's going on at school. The parent is responsible for doing that. Um, there are annual and quarterly IEP meetings and reevaluations to review the IEP goals, if they're being met, if changes need to be made, so on and so forth. Um, and now some parts of the IEP components. The main purpose of the IEP is to establish like measurable goals. We want to make sure that they are attainable goals for the child to meet, and everything in there is clearly stated. As far as the special education related services, such as, again, speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, adaptive PE, um, any other services that may be provided that a public agency on behalf of the child. And also, parents also receive what's called parents' rights. during those meetings, and that is to make the parent or guardian aware of those rights, and to let the parents know what their rights are legally under the IDA. Again, this is Gwen Baggett Harris, and I thank you for listening.